My name is Brian Oknianski, and firstly, thank you everyone for coming today. I'm an architect. I work at Studio Morin. We are architects and interior designers. We were the architects and interior designers for this building. I'm a senior designer there, and I'm also the head of sustainability. And this talk of uncertainty of what lies ahead, whether it's ESG or net zero, this is what I'm stuck in these days, trying to help everyone navigate that, because not one person has all the answers I see. So we're all on this journey together, I think. And so we're going to be talking today about a few things. Three new letters. They're not new anymore. Hotels, future planning laws. And with that, I'd like to introduce Aled Thomas from the City of London, but I'll ask you to please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Good morning, all. So yeah, I'm Aled Thomas. I work for the City of London Corporation, which is also kind of the governing body for the City of London, or the Square Mile as it's known. I joined the corporation last January, so I've been there just over 12 months. And I'm working specifically on the delivery of the climate action strategy, which the corporation agreed back in 2020. So happy to explain a bit more about what we're doing, but that's me.
Now, before you came to the City of London, can you just explain your career from before that and how you got to the City of London?
Yeah, I've been working, I guess, over the last 20 years on kind of local and regional development, both in the UK and across Europe, either within kind of local regional government structures or with those kind of structures. So I've been interested for quite a while in how different places see themselves, how they want to develop in the future, what kind of future do they want, how do they go about, creating that future. Obviously looking at the kind of combination of economic, social, environmental aspects of that development. And I suppose I've been working much more on the sustainability part over the last 10 to 15 years. I was previously working for an organization called Climate Kick, which was kind of a pan-European organization working with corporates, startups, city and regional governments, NGOs, just seeing how those different actors saw the kind of climate agenda and really working on some of the innovations around the agenda. So very much the kind of the business opportunity around the agenda. And I guess been fascinated at an European level, seeing how cities in particular have been working on that agenda, which has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. I'd say 10 years ago, it was a fairly peripheral issue. Cities doing lots of kind of individual schemes, environmental actions, those kind of things. But I think that agenda has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And with the corporation, as with many other city authorities, looking much more now at kind of net zero targets, plans, actions, and all the things that go with that, really.
Now, as I believe most will know, the City of London is a place to do business, but also a place that does business. And so you're in the same boat with us, I imagine, to some extent. So it'd be great to jump in and just ask for each three letters, E, S, and G. What is the City of London? How is it approaching ESG today?
Yeah, good question. I guess, the city is a fairly unique context. We have a fairly small residential population, less than 10,000 people, a fairly significant commercial, a globally significant commercial district, with a strong emphasis on finance, obviously, but also diversifying. And we've had roughly 500,000 people coming into the city and out of the city every day. At least it was pre-pandemic, and we'll see how that looks going forward. So I guess a very strong relationship with the business community. The majority of our members are nominated by businesses in the city, so it works slightly differently to most local authorities in that respect. So it's very much the voice of business within the corporation. I think on ESG, as I say, the corporation took a fairly strong position back in 2020 in terms of kind of the net zero strategy. So we're working towards net zero in our own operations by 2027. So we have our own corporate estate. We're a housing landlord. We have our investment property portfolio. So again, we're fairly not unique, but fairly specific in terms of our responsibilities in that space. We're aiming then for a kind of net zero square mile by 2040, net zero in our supply chains by 2040 and value chains, and also then looking at kind of the climate resilience and the changing climate, and how we make sure our buildings, public spaces are resilient to those changes. So quite a clear direction there on the environmental side. But I think that then is connected to both the social and the governmental, as well, I would say, the economic, which lots of the investments that we've got in our net zero strategy are very much based on a commercial cost savings basis. So the investments that we're making are really trying to seek some savings over the long term for ourselves, and I think that applies also then for the wider square mile. Lots of these investments are making our infrastructure and the expected costs hopefully to lower over the long term. We're co-designing infrastructure and buildings together, and avoiding some of the, I guess, higher costs around this. I think, as I say, the social side, it is a specific context. We don't have large number of residents. They are important, obviously. So for us, it's about creating kind of social value. How do we create a space in the city where people want to visit or work or live in? And what are the kind of key quality of life things around that, whether it's the environment, biodiversity, greening, all that kind of stuff. And I guess the governance side presents quite a few challenges as well. And I think that's an area we probably need to do more work. There's clearly a lot of work going on with the business community. I guess a lot of it is kind of topic by topic at the moment. So I think one issue for us is how we pull that together into a more kind of strategic partnership around ESG. So that's one of the things I and colleagues are working on at the moment.
Now, you said you're going, the City of London Corporation, net zero in its operations in 4 years' time, 3.5, let's say. How does an authority go about, when was that target set, first of all, for 2027?
Yeah, so we set the target back in 2020, October 2020.
So you gave yourself 7 years to go net zero in your own operations. Yeah. And well on track?
We are, actually. We produced a progress report back in summer of 2022. We've reduced emissions by 30% since the baseline, which was kind of 2018. So, at the moment we are on track. Obviously, we need to make sure we are going to stay on track, but the progress to date has been good. I think in terms of our own operations, as I say, we have our own estate, we have housing areas, we have our property portfolio. We've done a lot of work from basically starting from scratch, really, on measuring things like our own energy consumption, understanding kind of energy audits, how we do them on a very broad range of different kinds of buildings. How you then start changing that process from it being fairly manual to an automated process, how we're collecting the data on that side. And then, I guess, working from that baseline up into action plans per building, and looking at how those interventions could and should work, timing it with other works that are happening to those buildings. So working with our asset managers and really developing over time a kind of a picture and a sense of what can be achieved. But I would say also the leadership at the corporation has been essential. So as well as agreeing the strategy back in 2020, the corporation also agreed to invest 68 million primarily in our own operations over the first 7 years up to 2027. So that's a fairly significant, it's not all going on our own operations, but a fairly significant portion is on that immediate challenge of decarbonising our own operations and buildings, really. Because I think ultimately, it's no good us trying to agree a broader strategy for the square mile if we're not actually doing this ourselves and showing what is possible and what can be done.
Now, we heard this morning from our chair about hush washing, was it? Now, I understand that the City of London isn't hush washing. Actually, you're one of the early adopters. You mentioned data and gathering the data to get a baseline so you understand how to improve on it. So within the City of London, what is the holding of the property or the percentage for the City of London?
Yeah, we have responsibility for about 25% of the buildings in the square mile.
25%,
yes.
and so
which is larger than most local authorities may have a fairly small percentage. So it's fairly significant in the wider scheme of things.
And how do you go about acquiring the data from your portfolio, and what do you do with that data? I understand there's a great deal of transparency.
Well, yeah, I mean, city authorities have to operate in a world of kind of open governance and transparency and lots of these things. So I think one of the first decisions we made was to ensure that the climate action strategy that we have is following the greenhouse gas protocol for cities. It's a standard for cities working across the world on greenhouse gas. So we made a fairly early decision that we would go for the most ambitious monitoring mechanism there. So it's called Basic Plus, but basically it means scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions being monitored and the baseline developed and reporting happening upon that basis. And the report that we produced last year was a progress report, which is based on science and science-based targets. So I think that's quite an important first step. We've also then developed a climate dashboard. So drawing a lot of the data that we've acquired over the last few years from teams of people managing particularly our building portfolio, but broader than that as well, feeding that into a public dashboard. So if you go on our website, you'll see a climate dashboard which sets out for buildings or our purchase goods and services or for transport or for things like climate resilience. You'll see how we've set the baseline and you'll see how we're progressing against that baseline in those different areas. So it's meant to be a way of, yes, kind of monitoring and tracking how we're doing, but it's also kind of an open way of sharing with people in general how we're trying to go about this as a process. And people can question us on why focus on that as opposed to this, or it facilitates a discussion as to where we're going, because I think as you said at the beginning, there's no kind of one answer to this. It's kind of a learning process as you go, and you make decisions based on the best available data that you have. So, but we've had lots of interesting feedback and positive feedback from people saying, okay, I now understand how you're trying to, not just set ambition, but actually tracking how you're progressing and achieving that ambition. And to be, I guess pulling out some of the points, yes, we're making progress against our own operations. Where we're not making as much progress is on decarbonising commercial buildings. So if you look, and obviously that's not something that we control as a corporation. This is where collaboration and partnership is an important element. But if you look at the square mile, 65% of emissions comes from commercial buildings. So that's an area where we can see that we're behind, and we need to look at ways of accelerating that process, and that means working with a whole range of organisations, some of which are already very ambitious in this space, but also then working with others who are still trying to work out, what to do and which direction they want to go in.
Now, the city has a finite land resource, right? And office is king, right? And the financial sector is king. But I understand that, now we're shifting towards hotels and planning now, that, I mean, personally, my experience, most of the city closes on the weekends, right? And so what's the future of the City of London? Is it going to still be a place to go to work with the usual amenities? Or is, I mean, I think a few of us already know that you want to be a destination city. Yeah. So I take it you need more hotels, I reckon.
Yeah, I think the city has been a commercial and financial hub for a long time, and I think it will always that will always be kind of its USP. But yeah, our members, I think post-pandemic, have, you know, the kind of the big corporate strategy is around destination city, which is, I guess, trying to diversify the experience and the experiences people have in the city. That's whether you're a worker or a visitor or live in the city. So there's an evolving program around destination city, which, you know, tries to provide different kinds of experiences. That's not just kind of a program of events or happenings in the city. You know, it's things like the Museum of London moving to the Smithfield Market. We've got the Migration Museum that was approved a few weeks ago. So we've got, you know, cultural things like that happening. But it's much broader in terms of, you know, it comes to our transport strategy and how we make the city an area of you know, clean air, an area that's easy to move around. I think it's fairly sustainable already in terms of transport, in terms of the way people come in and out of the city, but we still want to reduce the kind of the traffic and the congestion in the city. It comes back to kind of our planning policy and how we create you know, a vibrant and diversified offer in the city going forward. So yeah, that's kind of the overarching strategy for the corporation going forward. And I suppose just on hotels, I mean, over the last 10 years, we've seen a fairly significant increase in the number of hotels in the city. So I think it's gone up by 40%, the number of hotels over the last 10 years, 50% more kind of bed space in the city. And obviously, we're in the process now of developing a new kind of city plan. The last one was agreed back in 2015, and lots has happened since then. So yeah, as you say, that's a kind of a key component of the destination strategy going forward, and I guess raises questions as to, yeah, do we sort of look at things like clustering of hotels in the city linked to some of the kind of flagship destination sites in the city, and also potentially, I guess, diversifying the kind of accommodation provided by the hotel industry. I think it's typically been kind of your 4-star hotels catering predominantly for the financial district. If we're looking at a kind of broader offer around destination city, then that probably suggests a kind of diversified offer there in terms of hotel accommodation as well. So there's lots of things to consider and think through.
Another quick question, or are we?
Well, I guess just to leave on a note of what is up ahead with planning for, let's say, we want to bring more hotels into the city. We appreciate that buildings of a certain stature, of a certain height or size, will inevitably have more onerous requirements being referable to the Greater London Authority. But is there, let's work backwards from there with more requirements for understanding whole life cycle carbon. What are you expecting of development moving forward from a planning point of view?
Yeah, I mean, we're still seeing a fairly strong kind of development pipeline post-pandemic, so that's, you know, a strong show of confidence in the city. We are prioritizing retrofit. So we recently, last couple of weeks, agreed a planning advice note on whole life carbon. So, you know, any developer now at the very early stages of looking at that potential development, we want to see the evidence for why a building is being demolished or proposed to be demolished, and why, you know, what are the options of addressing both operational and embodied carbon going forward. If there is a redevelopment, we're expecting very high standards, you know, the best practice effectively. We want to see the city as kind of leading the way in that respect, and the good news is there's lots of industry leaders also active in that space. So that's some of the things that are happening. We're in the process of developing a city plan, as I say, which will probably be out for consultation maybe towards the end of this year, early next year. And as I say, it's not just looking at kind of carbon, it will look at the wider kind of offering around transport, biodiversity, you know, making the city a very attractive place to work, live and visit.
That's great. Thank you both very much. Round of applause. Just very quickly. So for those of you who don't know, the way the regulations have been designed, particularly this thing called, is that okay? Particularly this thing called the GHG protocol, which you'll hear quite a lot about today for those of you who don't know, Essentially, it means that companies have to report in their value chains, on their suppliers, okay? So the hotels that you own, operate, or will be building in Aled Square Mile, right, are part of his value chain, okay? So they have to, if he's going to get to net zero, you have to help him get there in your operations. That's how this thing works. It works up and down these value chains. So that's why it's not really an option to go, you guys carry on, I'll just carry on over here doing my own thing. It doesn't really work that way. I think that's a good kind of way to sum it up. That was terrific, both. Thank you very much.